Okay, students, let's see how we can use Quixel now with a slightly more complicated model. So I have here this relatively simple space speeder that I've kept simple for this tutorial, but you can obviously have an object with much more detail than this. Now I've already UV'd it. If I go ahead and open up the UV template here, we can see this is my UV layout. And we can see a bunch of the different parts of my speeder. Specifically, these bits here are the wings, and this is the cockpit. And the rest is sort of the back of the ship and all of our other little details. Now, what we need is to get this out so that we can create a special map for Quixel. And we do this by going to Tools and selecting Render UV Template, which is going to open us this little dialog box here. Now, you want to make sure that Visible Edges is on, and that mode fill solid is on. And basically fill is going to be your color of the filled in polygons, and the edges are going to be whatever color you pick here. So you can choose whatever color you like that you think makes them stand out. I chose like a gray and a white. And then you want to click Render UV Template, and it'll create this here. And this is the image we want to save. And I'm going to go ahead and save it in my little desktop export folder here as a JPEG. And I'm going to call it Speeder UV Template. And then we're basically done in Max. You can and should export this as an FBX so that we can open it in Quixel. But our next step is actually in a image editing software. In this instance, I'm going to use photopea, but you could use Photoshop if you have it, or anything else that lets you draw on a JPEG. So I'm going to grab, go to this export folder. Here's the JPEG we made, and I'm just going to drag it into photopea. And what we want to do is we want to draw over this. And there's a number of different ways you could do this. You could use your magic wand tool. I'm just going to use the polygonal lasso, which is going to let me draw basically shapes with straight sides. And I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to paint over this. Now, I know that I want the wings, the top of the wings, to be a little different. So I'm going to select, and the things that are black don't really matter because you don't have a polygon there. So the material, any material you have there won't show. So you can overbleed the edge here. You just sort of trace what you're looking for. And then pick a color, any color, and fill it with the paint bucket tool. So I'm going to go ahead and choose like bright orange and fill that in. And then I know I want the cockpit to be a different material. The tops of the wings is cool because then I can put decals on there, but the cockpit is going to be glass or something else, a very different material. So I'm going to trace that as well. And you could zoom in to make sure you're getting a more accurate cutout than I am here. I'm going to go ahead and pick, I don't know, let's go blue. I'm going to hit undo there so I can paste. And then if you had another bit you wanted to call out, you could trace that as well. Maybe you want the back to be different. You could trace that and make it its own color. In this instance, I think 3 is good for me. So what I'm going to do for the last bit is I'm just going to pick a third color. Let's get into like this color here. And I'm just going to fill in the rest. So this is literally what we're looking for. It's just big, solid blocks of color. And then I'm going to save and export this as another JPEG again. And go to export and put it in here. And I'm going to call this one Speed UV Template Matte ID, because that's what we need. Now, I am finally ready to go back to Quixel. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new mix here. I'm going to call this Speeder. I do want a custom model again. This time I'm going to grab the speeder and open it. And before leaving this page, this time I'm going to click right here and click this button that is helpfully linked for me. And it's going to open the texture sets editor. And down here, I want material ID. And I'm going to grab this, this painted material ID. Now, let's actually get the one I did just now and grab this one. Okay, and notice Quixel figures out really quick bright orange, bright green, and bright blue are those colors. And you can have a whole bunch here. It figures them out, and it'll make as many IDs as you need. Now that we've correctly UV'd stuff and gone through the order, you'll notice a bunch of things like stuff being scaled correctly, and I won't have to do as much work as I did with the cliff. I'm going to go ahead and look at my metals I have here and pick maybe this rusted metal sheet, and it will load and put it all over our whole ship. And you can see because of our unwrapping, it does stuff in different areas. Like in some cases, it actually correctly goes around corners, which is kind of nice. See here, it's going correctly around the front. But now that we have this material ID channel, but now that I have my material IDs, I can add a material ID to this layer and say, hey, I only want you to be on orange and green. And notice now it skips the bit on top here that was my cockpit. So I can add another layer, potentially. Let's add this like riveted sheet. And tell it, hey, I only want you to affect the wingtops. And then, just like I did previously, I still have all the different controls in terms of height blending, and I can have the rivets just poke through and a little bit of rustiness. I can still use the paint layer and, paint on the surface. Let's turn on the albedo. Can paint on the surface of the model. And you can even paint up the side of the model. And what's cool is, while you're working on all this, you can switch to 2D mode and see, here's the UVW map that it's creating. And you can see how this matches our existing one that it's putting together for us, and it ignores the dead space. One of the materials that I really like is these imperfections, and you can tell it comes with a lot of them. So there's stains and grunge and just all sorts of bits, scratches that you can have overlay over your surface. And I can tell it to I could even turn off the albedo on it, but all those scratches remain. So if we turn on and off, you can see the more imperfections and such that it's adding to our scene. Now, I can't just put a glass on here because I didn't model an inside, and I don't want it to be see-through, but I could put a chrome on here or something similar. Add a quick surface layer. Let me see if I can find a chrome metal. Aluminum will work, or some of these shiny steels will work. And give it its own material ID of only being the bright blue. Could also add decal layers if I wanted to have, graffiti. The graffiti, just like anything else. Do notice that since it moves across the surface of my, it moves here on the UVW map, it shows up on multiple pieces. So you can control it this way and just use it to line up on a part of your of my wing here, because I can control sort of its location on the UVW map. And then I can switch back to 3D view and see how I've used it. Just like we did with the cliff, when you're happy with it, when you've added all your details, when everything is looking great, you can export it, export as FBX, export your materials. There they go across the bottom, and we're done. And I still have this previous Unreal bit open, so we can grab our new speeder. I'm going to go ahead and bring it in. Import all. Grab its materials that it made, and you can see all the materials that it custom made from our Quixel. It also helpfully names them all correctly for you. And now here's the speeder just like it shows in Quixel, with all of its detail work and everything.